Hey guys, it's Baileywiki, and this is the release for August 2023. It's the big monthly release. This is a big desert settlement expansion. This is going to be a precursor to a much larger urban expansion system. But we've got tons, like hundreds of new buildings, old buildings that have been remastered to work with the desert. We've got merchant stalls and shops and shelves. We've got lots of different plot devices. We've got stages and fighting pits, and like a bunch of really, really good stuff that fits together like this. You can see the settlement that was slapped together with a couple of tiles and a few prefabs, and all of a sudden we've got a very interesting, playable sort of desert settlement with all these interesting terrain changes, and you're just seeing different ways of linking these pieces together in these different types of maps. And you can, because this is one of the most popular things that we hear from is how do I make cities? So we're going to give you just more tools to do that and to do it really quickly, prefabs that you can just slap down and change and be able to create, big interior spaces, big exterior spaces, and to do them really, really quickly. And so I'll walk you through some of these sample scenes here and how they were made. And then you'll get these with the release along with all the inventory pieces to make your own. But you can see how big these scenes actually get. You can't see a token here, but you can see from the buildings, these big interior spaces. You can make interior spaces that crawl like dungeons like this. This is a big tavern that's just, you can keep building forever and ever, and you can have your players discover all kinds of things that you want them to discover. And I've got all of these new maps that are already made, like the Rock's Nest and others that leverage a lot of the new rich texture systems to make these maps that are just kind of useful for all sorts of campaigns. You can make cave systems now, and they just turn out really great, and they're very, very fast to make, especially if you're using Dungeondraft. The 3D release has also a bunch of new components, as well as some really groundbreaking scenes. This is a Pathfinder scene. I'll link to the video where we're going to cover this with somebody from the Pathfinder team, just talking about that as a game system. And we also say, look, let's release a Pathfinder map for everybody, which of course you can use in lots of different ways. But here's some of the new, castle and ruin systems what you can do with these. I mean, look at this map, the verticality, the ways that you can play this map with your players. It's something you can only do with third dimension, and it lives right alongside all of your 2D stuff as well. Here's just an example of a map from Violet, who's been designing just some really, really great stuff. Tons of interactions, tons of automation built into it, spells and effects and other things, but just the map design itself based on and inspired by a lot of, of the official adventure releases and games that you guys are probably playing today. But just very, very playable maps, crawlable. Your players can spend multiple sessions in these, and they've just got lots of points of interest. And again, at that verticality. The Dungeondraft release is pretty big as well. So there's a lot of new rich textures. There are going to be even more coming up as the months roll by. We've got all of the new desert assets and things that you can use to create your own desert components and desert buildings and things like that. But you just have such a variety of things to work with here. I'm looking forward to what you guys come up with. I've taken everything I've designed from a Dungeondraft perspective, and I've given you the files for that as well, so you can come in, reverse engineer these things, make them your own, make modifications to them. And you can create maps like this super quickly and be able to, export these into Foundry and almost use the assets as a way to inspire you on what you can build. Of course, we do give you a bunch of new assets as well. Modular wagons. Wagons is one of the most popular things to look for. There's so many places that you want to use wagons when you're doing your storytelling that we just gave you a lot of pieces to be able to kit bash them, make unique tiles, export them as your own kind of cool new version. So with that, let's jump into the release and let's see what you think. Okay, so let's talk about what's updated. First, most of the modules are updated. Towns, Premium module, Nuts and Bolts is updated. Also, City District 5, that's where a lot of the new desert assets are hiding. So you want to update all of those. And also, of course, the 3D module got an update as well. Everything is either in the desert release as prefabs, like you're seeing here, or there's a bunch of remastered things as well. These are old buildings that are now turned into desert buildings. We've got all of these scenes for desert settlements, and then in the premium module, all of these ready-made scenes as well. I'll walk you through those here in just a second. You're going to want to go into the prefabs, into the new content. You'll find everything in there, including the remastered stuff and some other little Easter eggs and surprises. And then you're going to want to go into the town's scenes. That's where you're going to find all the new inventory scenes, all the new desert settlements. And then also in the premium, Baileywiki premium module, you'll find all of those new ready-made scenes as well. In terms of what's in this release, you can see here's some of the new terrains, the unlimited terrains that are available. You can see these are just great sort of, what I call deadlands. Um, I've updated the macros to be able to use all of these, but lots of new, hills and kind of grassy areas and other things that you can use. Again, these things zoom and pan, so you can zoom in on a little portion of it and get an entirely different map as you sort of randomly generate these. Lots of new rocky terrains as well. I think these are also really flexible and really interesting. You can obviously lay in trees and bushes and things like that, but this gives you a base terrain to work off of depending on what kind of story that you're telling. And then we've got all these new ocean pieces as well. Just so many reasons to do ocean scenes. I wanted to be able to zoom and pan in on those. As usual, all of the random overlay terrain macros and nuts and bolts have been updated. You do have to have the premium module for them to find the artwork. But as you click them, you can just pan and zoom around and keep randomizing your terrain until you find something that you like to work with as a starting point. You can make the underlying tile, again, as big as you want. And then the scrolling token magic effects controls is a way of just adjusting that terrain once you find something that's close, but you want to zoom around and pan more. I do have all of these um, remastered buildings. They come in kind of two varieties. There's one where it's desert multi, and that means that the top and the bottom, the roof and the bottom, are both set up with with multi-face tiles, and you can just right-click them if you have quick edit mode on, and you can create the desert or use the desert version of these. These work really well with the system that I'm about to show you. If it just says desert roof, that means that the base itself does not have, desert, but the roof does. And so you can use a bunch of the existing buildings in the library to be able to build these desert settlements. Here's the actual desert buildings that I've made. And these will also get some regular building treatment here in a future release. But these just give you a bunch of brand new buildings that you can use. You can drop them in to these desert scenes and have a bunch of new shops and homes and other things that didn't exist before. They are all made in the same form factor as the kind of the regular town city buildings, so you can give them regular roofs as well. But you can see there's just like a lot of really cool, interesting sort of, plot hooks and things like that. All of these rooms can come as empty or dressed. They all come with this new roof. The roofs are the same as before, but I changed them to this more muted tan color. I think it works with more of the trains and things like that. They also do have some of these optional awnings that come on them. They're all colorable. So if it's, again, red in tint, you can use the Dungeondraft colorable option. But if you hit Shift F with Mass Edit and you look for the tag awning, it will, and then you hit search. You have to apply the tag there, hit search, and it selects all of the awnings, all of the tiles that have that in the scene. Now, when you hit Shift E, once they're all selected, you can turn everything blue, for example. And it'll turn all of your awnings blue in case you want sort of a colored theme for your town. You can also, if you have the premium version of Mass Edit, you can right-click that little button and vary all of their colors, like do a rainbow of colors. Really fun for creating a town that's got a lot of color variability and things like that. I mentioned there's a lot of new things. There's like a leather shop or a tanner. There's, a little worship area, kind of a sanctuary, different types of shops and homes. This would be like a home that we're looking at. This is more of like a chef's kitchen. And while these all have roofs, they all work really well with the rest of the system, which I'll show you. It lets you make all these really interesting interiors as well. There are some new pillars, some plants, some new Michael Gelfi audio here. So let's take a listen. Great for all those Badlands and Deadlands I've introduced. And then we've got this great African city loop that works really, really well, and just some things that you're gonna end up wanting to decorate into your area. We also have this canal set. You just throw these on, they resize really, really well, and it lets you create canal systems on your maps also, which I'll show you here in just a second. Here's all of these rooms now. These rooms do not have roofs. They're not meant to. They're meant to be rooms that you can link together and really very easily put down over these kind of base tiles, which I'll show you. And you can see they all come in a desert and regular town version. And wait until you see what you can create with these. You can create these interior spaces that are explorable, almost like dungeons. And you can throw them together really in any kind of way. Some of them have these plot hooks, like giant hole in the floor or cages. There's meeting rooms. There's tons of bedrooms and things that you can put together if you want to just assemble your own inn. This is really, really flexible. I don't recommend doing like multi-level buildings with it. I would link those together as different scenes, but creating a single level scene with all of these really couldn't be easier. They've got all the walls and lighting and everything else already in them. And I'll show you here in just a second an example of the types of spaces that we can make. I've also included all of these shelves. These are tile sets. So you just drag them in as a set, you release them from their prefab, and you can move these around. You can add other items. If you use Forgotten Adventures or Tom Kartos or Dungeon Quill, you can just drop in swords and lots of other things. If you don't want to go through the trouble of all that, I have created a bunch of prefab um, shelves as well, like you're seeing here, armor and weapons, and these are all using a lot of those artists that I just mentioned. You've got, you can create jewelry shops of different sizes, apothecary, herbalists, all that stuff. And then these are just another tile set for hallways. This is for creating those interior spaces that I mentioned before, which I'll show you some examples. And then a ton of tavern um, and general decor items. This is actually a prefab where you can just double click it and it'll randomly go through all of those table tiles that you saw earlier. This makes it real easy to drop that into a scene and then just have, really quickly make your own tavern or just drop it into an empty place for, like creating your own home, things like that. This one is just these sort of tileable tables where you can make, really large tavern areas, just tiling these tables together like that. So feel free to check that out. And a lot of these you can double click to change them, or you can right click to turn the light off. A lot of them come with lights already embedded. Other tables that you can resize, these are a little bit larger tables for different types of environments, just to vary it up a little bit. And then you've got these great plot hooks. So you've seen these in other releases. I've created now assets out of them. And you can drop in this prefab. You can hear it's got sounds, but if you double click it, it'll change to a stage. Or, if you right click it, it'll turn the light on and off. Double click it again, it changes to different type of fighting pit or like a yawning portal, right? So you can just drop it in when you're looking for plot hooks to drop into a scene, and it just comes already built. You notice there's ambient sounds around all of these. You can just turn them off too if you don't want to hear them. But pretty cool. You'll see those also implemented in some of the sample scenes too. You can see that prefab right there. And then it's funny, Molinet gives us analytics, and the number one search term is Wagon. So we thought, you know what, let's throw the mob their red meat. So you got lots of new wagons. You're going to see systems come out where we can drop a bunch of cargo into these wagons, and you can do other things with them. They do come in different varieties. If you double click them, it changes the wheel style. But, even like chariots, we just didn't see enough chariots out there and other kinds of wagons. So just giving you more to work with in your scenes. Now let's look at some of the scenes. This is an example of one of the desert settlements, this desert settlement 0. And you can see these are very expansive settlements. This is the night view. They all have roofs on top of them. But I just dragged these in on top of this very special base tile that I've designed. And what I mean is what's making the background of this settlement work, you can see it's very interesting. It's got, you know, uh, different elevation changes and things like that. There's a lot of detail, but you just slap them down, rotate them, resize them, move them around, and they stack together really well. You have to move them around until you find a way that they work. And then you just end up with this really organic, um, easy to build settlement. And you can create these as big or as small as you want to. And like you're seeing here, you just drop in some of these prefab buildings and you're doing great. You can cover up stairs and other things like that with the building itself. And it just gives you the freedom to just kind of move things around and play with them. If you come in here, you go into the base, you can change these empty and redecorate them. You can get rid of these prefabs entirely and drop something else in. Like that could just be an empty square instead of having a building in the middle of it. But it lets you create these really cool spaces with your players can like dive in and out of alleyways and climb up stairs and really have more interesting tactical battles, but the effort to create them is very, very low. So check it out. Look up all the remastered buildings. I mean, there's probably over 100 buildings that you can pick from. Each one has different variations within it. So, and including all of or many of the buildings from the existing set. So just look for the word desert inside of the building compendium, drag something in that you like, go up to the roof level, and then right click it, and then you just change it to a desert roof. And it's really, that easy. That building is now, in the scene. I'm going to rotate it to where I like its orientation. I'm just going to tuck it into a place, and it looks like it was just built there, right? Obviously, we don't have a background, we don't have terrain around this town. That's not the point. The point is to have a fight or exploration inside of a town itself. And you can see it just kind of works. It's all pretty seamless, and it really gives you the freedom to design these things really however you want. Just looking at another example of how these things fit together. This is, a square. I did include this new control. If you click on it, you can drag it out like a prefab and it'll play ambient noise just once. So instead of putting these things on a loop where all of a sudden it become irritating, you kind of want to play it when your players get to the scene for the first time, but then it just dies out on its own. So you can use that same sound control, just change the file that it plays, and you can drop it into some of these scenes. Many of them come with it already. But you can just see some of the components, a lot of the market components that I showed you earlier, this time just situated in a simple kind of smaller square. Another one, this is a large tavern. This has the fighting pit deployed, which you could, again, change to something else. And just different ideas of what kinds of buildings, this happens to be a home, might be splayed around this settlement, this market square. We've got a torture room here and other things that you've seen in the past now turn into assets that work in like a desert environment. And you'll see me do more of this. By far, our biggest request is how to make cities. And it's one of the things with our mastery class that we end up doing quite a bit is just teaching people how to make cities with all of these assets. So I just wanted to give you guys more tools to be able to do that. These assets certainly work in other environments other than desert. But, if you've been inspired by Critical Role recently and some others, and you wanted to build some desert scenes, you certainly have more than enough assets to be able to do that now. Here's a different view of the same system. This is using one of those background tiles, but now we've actually built an entire tavern interior. So rather than thinking of it like a exterior city, we're treating that base tile as an interior to a tavern. And we're dropping in all those tavern assets. We're double clicking them. If we want to change them around, we're going to right click them to turn the lights off. And, we've got pool tables laid out. We've dragged in the rooms, so we don't need to just limit ourselves to buildings now. We can use those rooms I showed you as well. Buildings work too. Just take the roofs off of them. But we're essentially like navigating in the interior of a giant tavern. Right? That might be like a little outdoor area. But I want to read my meeting room here, so I'll drop one in. Right? I might want a little place to stay. Maybe there's an NPC hiding in there. I've added a kitchen. Right? These things are really easy to just drop in. It's just an entire prefab and it's just ready to go. Here we've got, here's like a little pool table, pool room. These are things that are fun for players to discover. Maybe this is going to be a base of theirs. And, there's the room with the hole in the middle of it. And they can really spend a lot of time navigating around a space like this. And you can build it out as far as you want. I can have these rooms go back to infinity, them being able to go back and maybe discover, another operation going on, a nefarious operation in the back. You can see these are all just rooms, just prefabs you just dropped in. You don't have to worry about walls or lights. You just move them around to where they make sense to you and, keep going, build more hallways into the back. We've got a little casino back here, all with the prefabs that you saw and the tiles that were introduced in this release. So great, right? Really flexible. Here's a really, really large scene. And this is just to show you, like, you can really make these things as big as you want. Of course, the bigger you get, the more demand you're going to put on download times and things like that. That's where Ripper's Media Optimizer comes in, right? I'll show you that here in a second. But here I just threw in, let's put some gallows at the end here. These gallows work, by the way. Your players, if they are standing under the gallows, they get injured. But just different assets. This is using a lot of the jungle assets to kind of dress up this city. Here we've got some of the canal systems. You can see you just throw them down and all of a sudden you've just got a waterway, right? And it makes more tactically interesting things for your players to navigate. And you can see, these are huge buildings. This map is gigantic and it's just piecing all of these things together. Even this fountain is just a prefab that you just drop in with sound. I've got a dojo over here that your players can, come and level up their martial skills. It's really whatever you want and just come in here and swap it out for, something else. Turning the lights down and stuff like that, you get all these really great effects. But if we look at this media optimizer, we're just going to go with all of the foreground or background tiles selected. We're going to not include background because there is no background to select. These are all just tiles. And then it will eventually hit combine and it will take all of that background tiles, combine it, and then optimize it as a single tile. You want to make a backup of your scene before you do that. But what that does is kind of once you have everything ready the way you want it, it just optimizes it for performance. Here's another example where I'm just using that tavern that you saw before as a starting point, and then I'm building all these rooms off of it. And I'm making this really an explorable map. The idea is that this really does function like a dungeon. Your player's going to find NPCs. Notice that sound in the back. That's the new Foundry V11 ambient door sounds. I think they're really crisp and sharp. There's lots of different options for you. So I suggest if you haven't played around with it, try it. It's going to replace the ambient doors module that we've all been using for the last year plus. And, I said, I just want, I want these rooms to go back. I want that hallway to go back into this meeting room. And the meeting room has other nefarious things hanging off of it. And there's a cultist room in the back. It's really just up to your imagination, right? Here's another really large scene. If you'll see my token here in just a second, you can just see how these pieces are just thrown together to create interesting, elevations and things like that. This happens to be a temple, and we could have a lot of fun in a scene like this, but making it was super easy, right? It's like 3 tiles in the background and then, a couple of prefabs, kind of in some strategic places, and then we can use Media Optimizer. Here's an example of all of the settlement stuff just broken out, so you don't actually have to have them on top of that thing at all. This is just an oasis in the middle of the desert. And I've just laid out some rooms because I want to have, some kind of plot elements here. And maybe my players survive to this point. Looks great at night. All of these scenes have, night lighting and things like that. depending on what you're trying to do. And of course, we have all these other ready-made scenes. A lot of these are using the terrains, the rich terrains that I've introduced, or the rich textures I've introduced to Dungeondraft. You can get all of these maps and change these. Everything you're looking at here was made with that system. So I recommend, like, here's a rock's nest, right, with all these clouds around this sort of central mountain peak. There's this, ratty nest full of bones and animal bones. Just something to give you some inspiration. And, who doesn't need a giant rock map? Here's, a rocky crossing. These things are just always useful in campaigns. And if it gives you some inspiration for an encounter, it's great. This is called the altar. It's a bunch of the new assets kind of stacked on top of each other with some, candles lit all the way around it. Sort of a natural kind of altar. Another beach scene. This is sort of a volcanic rock beach. It's got this, ruin of a tower on it. Got the Dark Galleon here, just as an example. Of course, the Dark Galleon's got like 6 levels itself, so you can navigate around those. You can remove the galleon, put something else in there, of course, different kinds of ships from the fleet. But just more examples of what you can do. I really like this map. This is the last one. I think this is the last one. This was made also with the rich textures in Dungeondraft. It's just a custom cave map that I just made really, really quickly. You can get the original file and change this around. But you can see how effective that system is for creating cave systems. And this is just decorated with, what I thought would be interesting decorations. Even these webs are just added after the fact. You can put them all around this, or you can change them out for something else. But it just shows you like a really good map that you can start with that is super flexible. And again, if you get Dungeondraft and some of those assets, you can come in and change this pretty substantially yourself. And with that, let's jump into the 3D stuff for this month.
Alright troops, Swift here again to talk about this month's release, what sort of props we're adding in, and what maps are using them. So last month we released that graveyard set that was a bit more realistic than previous sets we've released, and we got a fair bit of positive feedback from that. So this month we're releasing another set that's in a realistic style, this time a more broadly applicable ancient castle set. As you can see, there's quite a few bits and pieces to it, so let me go over the different sections and how they're expected to be used. So up at the back here, we've got the thin walls section. There's a 2-meter wall, a left and right 1-meter wall, a half wall, and then a low wall. These 5 are going to be your basic building blocks to make any sort of stone structure out of. And then we've got a whole bunch of different types of broken walls. These, of course, snap to the grid just like the main walls, and they'll be what you can use to really sell that crumbled look. Generally, you've got walls that have crumbled on one side, like these, and then you've got walls that have crumbled from the top, like these ones here. And then we've also got a few smaller wall chunks over here, and you can use these to block out broken bits of walls, or just use them as decoration of, like, fallen wall pieces, for instance. Next up, we've got the thick walls. Same deal, except these ones are made more like the outer walls of a castle. There's a standard piece, a vertical half piece, and a horizontal half piece, and then a selection of broken pieces, either broken on one side or broken on the top. As you can see, looking at the broken edge, they're much bulkier. They've got, 2 layers of bricks and then stone and bricks in the middle there to really sell that durable look. And likewise, we've got various sizes of broken wall pieces to go with those. It might be tricky to visualize how these might go together, so I'll go into it a little bit more when we have a quick look at the map made with these in a bit. These pieces over here are corner pieces. If you've got a corner with 2 walls intersecting, you can cap the corner off with one of these and it'll blend in perfectly. Next below those are the balustrades, or basically stone railings or fences, that would create balconies or open walkways. We've got a full-length piece, half-length piece, and then several different broken pieces. And we've also got these little pillars that are supposed to go in between these pieces to kind of join them all together. A larger one for corners and a smaller one for in the middle of fence sections. So the next up are the wall pieces with something in them, starting with archways. We've got several different variants, as well as things like this fence piece to block ways off while still allowing vision through. There's also a blind arch over at the end. That's mostly for decoration, though I could certainly see that being used by like a portal or something. When it's deactivated, it becomes just a plain brick wall. Related to the archways, sort of, are bridges. We've got two variants of the bridge, both 4 blocks long. One of them on the right here has its own supports, so you can put that standing on its own or reinforced by other walls. This one here ends in points, so this is designed to be used with, walls on either side supporting it. After that are some window pieces, which are pretty straightforward, just normal walls with a hole in them. And we've got a wide and narrow and a thick variant of those for being able to see through the walls. So next up is stairs and floors. So the stairs, an important note for these is that these stairs are tileable, which means that if you, say, copy a set of stairs and then you want to make it higher, you can just lift this up, move it over, snap to the grid, and you've got a perfectly seamless staircase, and then you can just keep going up and up. Then when you want to put floors on the top there, something you'll need to do, if I copy this floor over here and lift it up, you'll notice that by default it sticks up above the stairs. So to fix that sort of thing, what you're going to want to do is open up the configuration for it, go over to the 3D section, go to Advanced Settings, and uncheck Auto Ground, which will be around in the middle, and then apply that. And that will mean that the floor is below this widget here, and with it in that position, it lines up perfectly with the stairs, so you can use those to tile as high or as low as you like, and the floors will always line up with them. Similarly, the floors should line up with the top of walls as well. Speaking of the floors, so the floor pieces are fairly self-explanatory. We've got a 2x2 piece, a 1x2 vertical and horizontal piece, just to make sure the bricks line up correctly, and then several broken pieces for when the floor has crumbled away, or the ceiling rather, and then some individual broken pieces as well, just for bulking out broken floors or for just placing around as, broken off pieces of stonework. There's also these rubble piles here that are very multifunctional. They're just, dirt and bricks piled up. Put those at the base of broken walls or just around places that have seen rubble, and that'll look pretty cool, I think. And then down at the front here, we've got a variety of pillars and pillar-like objects. A few of them are just tall brick structures, so big columns here in various states of disrepair. And a few of them are more ornate, like the cylindrical ones here and here. The smaller ones are intended for corner decoration too. If you've got a room corner that looks a bit bare, you can put one of these in it to kind of look a bit like a support, and that'll help break it up a bit, make it look quite nice. And then, of course, you've got a slope piece here, which is a buttress. You put that on the outside of a wall, and that kind of gives it a more believably supported look. The last piece is a wooden scaffold. I'd say put this amidst various broken wall pieces to give things a kind of under construction sort of look. That's fairly flexible, but obviously it's a kind of tall, fairly flimsy looking wooden structure. So that covers the structure pieces, and since the aesthetic of these might not match the foliage that's already in the module, we're adding a bunch more foliage in. To start with, a lot of ivy that's great for decorating the walls of like these ancient castles sort of deal. A couple of them have lips to hang over ledges and the like, but otherwise they can just be slapped onto any wall, add a bit of colour to it. Behind that, we've got a bunch of different grass pieces on the white background. They are kind of hard to see unless you zoom. Those would be good for just adding a little bit of kind of visual interest to otherwise plain kind of grassy areas. We've also got several bushes and shrubs of various size, and then several ash trees as well to kind of round out the whole thing. And these have been made to match the aesthetic of the wall pieces, so they should definitely go together in any map that they're together. Over towards the back here, we've got a minor expansion to the city set from a few months ago. These are some single-prop workstations for quickly making a place look like a place of work. So we've got a tailor, leather worker, a blacksmith, a woodworker, and an alchemist. And then at the back, we've got some decorative drapes and some theatre-style curtains. By a single prop, I mean, for instance, like this is an individual tile. So, just move it around as a single object. So it's really quick just to throw that down, and there you go. You've got a tailor workspace right there. And then right at the back, you've probably seen already, is the amphitheatre seating prop. So this has been created for one of the maps this month, but it would go great with any sort of theatre-style scene, or you could duplicate it, for instance, and then use it to create a arena-type map, for instance, by doing something like that. It's intended to be a kind of multifunctional piece there, but obviously it's very, very large, so there's a good chance it would be like the centerpiece of a scene, for instance. But speaking of the map this is made for, let's have a quick look at that just now. The first map we'll look at is this Ancient Theatre map. This one you've probably already seen if you've watched the Pathfinder video, but for those who haven't, it's based on a Pathfinder module involving a theatre built in the distant past that's still occupied to this day. There's an exterior with the amphitheatre-style seating and stage, scaffolding behind the stage and hidden by curtains, and then under the rooftop, let me just move this out of the way, are various interior rooms split up by doorways and furnished, each one of them. These rooms are, of course, fully editable because they're just made up of tiles here, and overall this map would be quite useful as a small dungeon. You've got the 5 rooms of the interior here, and then the large exterior as well. And then this massive open space out the front has a nice bit of verticality thanks to that raised seating area. This map is also going to be included in the free version of the Baileywiki 3D module, so if that's up your alley, then look out for us posting that in the near future, though remember not to have the free and premium modules installed at the same time. There'll be more details later when we post that. The next map we'll be having a quick look at today is the Ancient Gatehouse map. This one's been made almost entirely with the new assets for this month, so all the bits and pieces that you saw in that inventory scene. So hopefully it'll be a good example of how to get the most out of the many bits and pieces that are in there. It's comprised of these 2 ruined towers connected by a bridge. The ground floors of the towers open up into small rooms, but to actually climb up onto the towers, a character needs to make their way past them and head up this staircase here, or of course just scale the wall. There's a couple of interior spaces in here, some almost interior spaces, like over here, for example. And I'll show some examples of what I was meaning with the stone chunk pieces, for instance. Like inside this tower here, the floor has broken away to kind of show down to the ground floor of the tower. And it looks like a fairly seamless broken floor we've got here. But if I go to the tile controls view, you can see that that is a piece right there. But this side over here is actually 2 of the floor chunks that are just smushed together. And with those intersecting each other, it looks pretty seamless, and you can use that to pretty believably make any shape of broken floor that you like. Similarly, up here on the wall, for instance, we've got this broken peak here, where the wall's fallen away. And if I open up the tile controls, you can see that this is a wall piece even. This one here is as well, this one here is, and then this is actually just another chunk that's been slotted in there to make it look more kind of bulked out. So this is a pretty multifunctional map. You can use this for example, the party trying to get through the gate or trying to prevent someone from getting through the gate, or just as a sort of ancient ruined gatehouse that somebody has set up camp in, some bandits say. And this is also the first map we've made that is using the new Splat Map shader to texture the terrain. I'll go into detail as to what that means in a later video, but basically it means that you can use quite small textures to texture very large objects like this terrain, which means less strain on internet connections and graphics cards, and overall just easier to play on maps. If any environmental artists are out there, yeah, it's the same as the Splat Maps you might have heard of. Same idea. Just using an image to map textures onto an object. The next 2 maps we'll be taking a quick look at are by Violet, who is again making some really interesting maps. This month it's a very classic dungeon type map that's inspired by the Yawning Portal book, starting with an ascent up the side of a mountain to this great door in the cliffside. And one of the things that Violet has done with the maps is make them very accessible. You can see here, this object here is only visible to the GM, it's invisible to players. But if I click on this book here, it'll tell me that I can use the button to open and close the door. And then if I click on this blue cube, that will open and close the great gate down below. So that's a very, very clean and efficient way of turning any sort of object into a door, and also meaning that anybody can use it without having to fiddle around with settings or anything else like that. You can just click this button here, it'll open and close, simple as. Related to that, over this bridge over a chasm and behind this door, there's a red block. And what Violet has done is you can click on this red block, and then if you've got a token there, it'll be teleported to the second map, because this has been one dungeon that's been split off into halves. So it's a very kind of nice way to automate transferring between maps like that. And it also means that this map can be a bit smaller, since they've used quite high detail rocks in a lot of places. So if it was the full map, it might run a bit slower, for instance. This map here is pretty intricately designed, though. For example, over by the gates, we've got some stairs or some ladders that'll go up to these areas here that are overlooking the gate. And then following this passage by the side here, we've got these windows or arrow slits that look out onto the mountain pass. So somebody inside could attack the players from in there too. That's some quite intricate detail there. Down this corridor here, it seems to end in a dead end, at least as far as the players can see. But again, we've got these automated controls here. We can use the buttons to open the secret doors. So we can just click that, and it just becomes visible, becomes invisible with a click of a button. So all the DM needs to do is say, get the players to roll a search check or something, and then if they succeed, they can just click this button, and it disappears. The players can see that immediately. There's a barracks room the secret door leads through, and then back here there's another pretty cool piece of automation. To the players, these cubes will be invisible, but if they trigger this white tile, the poison area appears, or we can use the button to turn it on and off manually. So if a player activates this trap, and it's represented by this purple cloudy cube with the purple light inside. It's a very cool effect, I think. Beyond that, we've got some more classic dungeoneering. We've got rooms coming off the main passage there, and then we go from a kind of constructed dungeon into a more natural-looking cave, and then we see more of these red boxes, which are teleports to the other map that this has been a half of. So what I'll do is I'll show you that map right now. So the second map is the back half of the dungeon, so it's starting from over here. This red box down here represents the teleporter back to the first half of the dungeon. So there's this one here that we came in through that leads to this area. And there's also one down here, and this leads back to that door near the start of the dungeon that we saw. The main area in this half of the dungeon is this massive natural cave system here. Very classic dungeoneering experience here, with lots of detailed little nooks and crannies, like this camp down here with the very conspicuous fire, and then even a jail cell down below with a door that can be open and closed with the nearby automation here. Back in the main area, there's two paths to go from here. One way goes directly to this final chamber, the other way goes through this secret door, and through this trap-filled corridor, again with some automation to open and close the doors, or enable or disable the traps, for instance. And then in the main room itself, there's a fairly conspicuous fire cube here, but obviously to a player this would be completely invisible. The idea is there's like a vault door or something behind that there, and if the player set off the trap, then you can just press this button to fill the area with fire. Though something that you might do if you're a more confident user of 3D canvas is remove that and then use something like automated animations to drop a fireball or a fire spray or something down on the players. Whichever you think might look cooler. Either way, if the players can get past that trap, they can just break into the vault, assuming they can get through the door. And then inside that is some goodies. And then finally, in the main part of the room, there's this descent down into darkness with these stone stairs, surrounded by these great stone statues that are, again, just the usual tokens, though with stone textures applied to them. A pretty cool idea. I'd like to see people using it, because we have a whole load of tokens available to us. Overall, though, it's a good-sized dungeon, and I could see a party of players taking a while to get through this. It's a very kind of classic dungeoneering experience, and I absolutely love what Violet's done here with all this automation, making it so accessible, just being able to open and close doors with the click of a button. So that'll be all for the quick look for now. As ever with the 3D portion of the update, we'd love to hear your feedback on this month's or previous month's releases. This month, we did put a lot of energy into making this construction set out of castle pieces. Next month, I expect we'll put more energy into making maps and prefabs. Overall, we're looking to strike a balance between creating tools that you can use to create maps and also to create maps themselves and prefabs that you can use to very rapidly get sessions ready from nothing. Anyways, send us feedback via the usual comments down below, the Discord, and all that sort of thing. I'll see you guys later.
For the Dungeondraft release, there's a lot in the sample scene which you can get, but it's got some of the inventory pieces here. Also, you've got some of these new desert patterns or desert, city patterns and wall patterns, things like that. These are paths. These are walls. You have some wall components too, just to kind of finish off a wall or get strange corners and you want to cover them up with things, you can do that. There's a lot of different patterns that have come with this new release. If you click on this one and you scroll all the way to the bottom, maybe not all the way to the bottom, maybe it's somewhere around the middle. There's lots and lots of patterns. I recommend you check the change log, for everything that is new. But, you can click through here and you can see, a close-up detail of what's in there. This includes everything that was in there in previous releases, which is a good thing for me to dwell on for a second. This AI pack is becoming so huge. There's so many textures that are available in it that I'm going to be splitting that out starting next month. So I'm calling this this still combined pack. I'm calling the Legacy pack. But when you get into it next month, you'll see lots and lots of other packs: forest and grassy and hills and snowy and in settlements and many, many more. So that'll be coming next month. That just means that you're going to, if you build with, and if you've already have built and plan to build with this current release, you're going to want to hold on to this Legacy pack, just so in case you want to open those maps up in the future, they'll be able to open. The rest of the things that you'll find in the sample scene are, how I designed all of the buildings and roofs. You can come in here and customize these and export them and do your own thing with them. Here are a lot of the base pieces that I built that you can use as kind of a starting point. These are all in here. You can see there's different backgrounds. You can see how I use these different textures. These are all the same, the AI generated textures the rich textures that I've been using. You can see just like deconstruct how I did a lot of these things. Here's some of the vine overlay pieces that can help bring the stuff together. Feel free to come in here and redecorate rooms and re-export them and roll with your own. And then some of those scenes that you saw, those sample scenes, this is where I generated many of them. You can come into your train brush and you can see with 3 brushes, I made something of incredible detail very, very quickly and in a way that I think my players would be really excited about. So come in here and check these out. Again, use it to deconstruct how I designed some of these. And remember, you can blow these up to any size that you want once you get them into Foundry. Here is the cave system that I told you about before. This really started as a, this map. And then I just simply came in here and I covered things up as I wanted to design how these caves were interconnecting to each other. So I recommend you come in here and check it out, how I got here, and feel free to make it your own. Now, Zephyr's going to talk about the rest of the Dungeondraft release.
In Dungeondraft, we have additions to the Baileywiki Assets A pack, and that's going to be in the form of the Wagons release. We always feel like we never have enough wagons or wagon designs for our maps, so we decide to make a bunch of different wagon-themed assets. As you can see, you've got 5 different general body types for the wagons and a variety of wheels, and you can customize everything here from the floorboards and their materials, their state of repair, whether there are metal reinforcements or not, and you can mix and match these to your heart's content, including separate metal pieces so you can have things like damaged metal on top of just fine boards, etc. There's all the different accoutrement you could want for a wagon. You can add things like tailgates, steps, coverings, benches, etc., and you can swap all of these individual pieces out. And there are a variety of wheel designs available in a vertical top-down, a laying flat top-down, an incredibly broken version, and some perspective versions. And just like all of our other assets, these are completely colorable, so you can get the exact tint that you want as well. You don't have to just stick with the static look whenever you are designing your wagons. And you can find all of these under the Baileywiki vehicles, Baileywiki wagons, and Baileywiki wheels tags within the Baileywiki Assets A pack. Additionally, there are 6 new patterns added that are going to be metal pieces that you can use for reinforcing those wagon bottoms, or you can use it for a variety of other kit bashing styles. So there's 3 general designs here, and they come in both a clean version and in a damaged version for you to use. Finally, I just wanted to demonstrate really quickly how you can kit bash together a custom looking wagon using these different pieces. Again, since they all have colorable variants, you can do this quickly with the static versions or get really granular with the look you want to have on your wagons. And we're definitely excited to see what different designs people come up with in the community, and we're excited to create some other pieces that can go inside of the wagons. So as always, your feedback is greatly appreciated. Please let us know what you think about the wagon assets and what assets you would like to see next added to the Baileywiki Dungeondraft assets packs.
So that's it for the release. Let us know in the comments what you find inspiring, what ideas you have for us for future releases. And as always, give us any kind of feedback that you think can help us continue to drive forward Foundry and Dungeondraft and all the design work that we're doing. In the meantime, thanks everybody for your support as always. And of course, have fun making your maps.